Introduction. In the early 20th century, public education in the United States was shaped by segregation. Laws across the country required black children and white children to attend different schools. This separation was not accidental. It was created and enforced by the government. For many white communities at the time, segregation was seen as normal or even necessary to maintain social order. However, for black families, it represented a daily reminder of inequality and exclusion. Segregation affected nearly every part of daily life for black Americans. It influenced where children could live, learn, and dream about their futures. Schools were meant to prepare students for opportunity, yet segregation limited those opportunities from the start. For many years, this system went mostly unquestioned by those in power. In 1954, one Supreme Court case challenged this system and forced the nation to confront inequality. That case was Brown v. Board of Education.
Background on segregation and the law. School segregation did not appear suddenly. It was supported by legal decisions made decades earlier. In 1896, the Supreme Court ruled in Plessy v. Ferguson that segregation was constitutional. The court stated that public facilities could be separate as long as they were considered equal. Supporters of this ruling argued to preserve peace between races. However, civil rights advocates saw it as a legal justification for discrimination. This ruling became the legal foundation for segregation throughout the United States. It allowed states to separate people by race in schools, transportation, and public spaces. Although the Constitution promised equal protection, segregation continued without serious challenge. In reality, separate facilities were never equal. Schools for black children were often overcrowded and poorly funded. They lacked modern supplies, proper heating, and safe buildings. White schools received newer facilities and more resources. This inequality showed how law failed to protect black students. Segregation reinforced the idea that black Americans were second-class citizens. For nearly 6 years, this system shaped public education.
Everyday effects of segregation. Segregation was not just a legal issue. It had real effects on children and families. Black students often traveled long distances to attend school, while white schools stood nearby. Parents worried about their children's safety and future opportunities. Teachers in black schools worked with fewer resources. Classrooms were crowded and materials were outdated. Despite these challenges, many black educators showed resilience and dedication. Some white families were unaware of these inequalities, while others chose to ignore them. Still, the system sent a clear message. It suggested that black children were less deserving of quality education. That message affected how students viewed themselves and their future opportunities.
The origins of the Brown case. In Topeka, Kansas, segregation affected the Brown family directly. Linda Brown was a young black student who lived close to a white public school. Despite its location, she was required to walk a much longer distance to attend an all-black school. Her father, Oliver Brown, believed this treatment was unfair and harmful. Like many black parents, he wanted equal opportunities for his child. At the same time, school officials defended the system as lawful under existing precedent. Along with other parents, he decided to challenge the school system. They filed a lawsuit against the Topeka Board of Education. Their case was one of several similar cases across the country. Families in South Carolina, Virginia, Delaware, and Washington, D.C. faced similar issues. The Supreme Court combined these cases into one major case known as Brown v. Board of Education.
The legal strategy. The NAACP played a central role in the legal fight. Their lead attorney was Thurgood Marshall. Marshall and his team believed segregation itself violated the Constitution. Their argument went beyond unequal buildings and supplies. They argued that even if facilities were equal, separation alone created inequality. Some critics at the time argued that changing segregation too quickly would disrupt society. However, the NAACP focused on the long-term harm caused by discrimination. The legal team argued that the 14th Amendment promised equal protection under the law. They claimed that separating students by race denied black children that protection. Psychological studies were presented to the court. These studies showed that black children in segregated schools often felt inferior. This feeling affected self-confidence, motivation, and academic success. The lawyers argued that segregation caused lasting emotional harm. They asked the court to overturn past decisions and recognize segregation as unconstitutional.
The Supreme Court decision. On May 17, 1954, the Supreme Court announced its decision. The ruling was unanimous, meaning all 9 justices agreed. Chief Justice Earl Warren wrote the opinion for the court. The court ruled that segregation in public schools violated the Constitution. It stated that separate educational facilities are inherently unequal. For civil rights activists, this was a major victory, but for many segregationists, it was seen as a federal overreach. The decision overturned Plessy v. Ferguson in education, and it marked a turning point in American constitutional law. The court recognized that equality included dignity and opportunity, not just physical resources.
Reaction and resistance. Although the decision was historic, change did not happen immediately. Many states resisted desegregation. Some political leaders openly refused to follow the ruling. They argued that states should control education, not the federal government. New laws were created to delay integration. Schools were closed rather than integrated. The resistance became known as massive resistance. However, civil rights activists, students, and families continued to push for change. In 1957, the situation in Little Rock, Arkansas showed the strength of opposition. 9 black students attempted to attend Little Rock Central High School. They were met by angry crowds and blocked by armed guards. Federal troops were eventually sent to protect the students. This moment revealed how deeply segregation was rooted in American society, but also showed the federal government's growing role in enforcing civil rights.
Long-term impact. Brown v. Board of Education had a lasting impact on the nation. It strengthened the growing civil rights movement. It gave activists a legal foundation to challenge segregation in other areas. Leaders, students, and ordinary citizens used the decision as inspiration for protests, boycotts, and legal battles. The ruling helped pave the way for major civil rights laws. These included the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. It also influenced future court cases that expanded rights beyond race, including cases about gender equality and rights for people with disabilities. Brown changed how Americans understood equality and justice. While educational inequality still exists today, Brown remains a powerful symbol. It showed that the Constitution could be used to fight discrimination and injustice.
Conclusion. Brown v. Board of Education was more than a court case. It was a turning point that challenged long-standing beliefs about race, law, and fairness. By declaring that separate is not equal, the Supreme Court created a legal pathway for future challenges to discrimination. It set a precedent that the Constitution must protect real equality, not just equality in theory. This decision directly influenced later landmark cases and movements, including efforts to desegregate public spaces, protect voting rights, and expand equal protection for everyone under the law. It helped inspire legal victories such as Loving v. Virginia, which struck down bans on interracial marriage, United States v. Virginia, which helped advance women's rights in education, and Romer v. Evans, which allowed advances for LGBTQ rights. Beyond the courtroom, Brown energized the civil rights movement, encouraging people across the country to demand justice through protests, legislation, and continued legal action. The legacy of Brown continues today. It reminds us that progress often begins with challenging injustice, and that one case can open the door to broader fights for equality and civil rights for all.